just over a year ago, I'm listening to your podcast about someone acquiring and growing their group to something that I aspire to now owning my own group and aspiring to do those same things. Be relentless, folks. Your goals and dreams are out there. You just have to be willing to hear no a lot and fight through that.
Today, I'm thrilled to chat with Kyle Coleman, owner of Coleman Automotive. We dive into his journey from thriving as a dealership general manager to his first 6 months as a franchise dealership owner. Kyle reveals everything: how he secured startup capital, found his first stores, and transformed underperforming locations into profit powerhouses. Before we dive into the show, I have an ask. If you find any value in this episode, please share it with 2 other people, whether they're in the car industry or not, who you think would benefit. You'll hear some remarkable insights in this episode, and you'll quickly understand why I'm asking this. A big thank you to our sponsors for making today's episode possible: Dealer DMV, my very own CDG Recruiting, and Impel. And now let's get into the show. Kyle, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really look forward to today.
Dude, you have a fascinating story. It almost feels, it almost looks on paper too good to be true. And I know it's not, but that's why I'm excited to chat. So you were just starting to tell me, and I said, hold up, I want to press record. You were just starting to tell me what inspired you, or kind of about your journey, but what got you on your journey of acquiring dealerships. You went from, being in the dealership world. I believe most recently you were a general manager. Now you're an owner. And you've done this pretty quickly. I believe you opened up your first dealership, was it in May? So about 6 months ago?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. How many dealerships do you have now?
So we have 2 rooftops. We have a total of 3 brands. So I'm a dual point at one of my stores. So we have Ford and then CDJR. And then my other location is Chevy and GMC.
You're a stud, man. All right. Let's take it back. All right. So to take us back for a second. So talk to me briefly about your story. Like, how'd you come up in the industry? Let's just start there.
So right out of high school, I was trying to figure out whether I wanted to go to college or, my brother was selling cars at that time at a Hyundai dealership in 2005, 2006 time. And I just decided, I really think that, that path, selling cars. So my brother moved me up. I moved in, found a place up there in Fort Wayne, Indiana, started selling cars when I was 18 years old. Found great success in the first couple years doing that. And then it was interesting, we kind of all got shocked in 2008 when the economy got rocked a little bit, and, went from making pretty good money to working twice as hard to make half that money. And I decided to go back to and get my degree, and I went to Ball State in Muncie, Indiana. And then from there, I found a dealership there in town that he was a really big booster. And he was kind enough to allow me to work part-time selling cars while going to college, which, that's not always the easiest thing to be a part-time guy, in the car business. But, he made a spot for me, which was great. So allowed me to sell cars even while I was getting my education at school. And then after college, I went back to the company that I started my career at and kind of just worked my way up. And, with that organization.
Kyle, how old are you?
I'm just turned 37.
Wow. And so you basically joined right after high school.
Right. Fresh. So yeah, I've just over 18 years in the automotive business.
Okay. So you're an 18-year overnight success.
Yeah. That's correct. Yeah. That's the perfect way to put it.
All right. So then I cut you off. So keep going with the story. Tell us where we're going.
Yeah. So, the company that I was with, at that time, they only had a few rooftops, and the owner's sons were the general managers. And Matt McKibben was kind of like my mentor. He was the general manager at one of the stores. Taught me a lot about subprime. At that time, CDJR was heavy subprime. I mean, still to this day, they're fairly heavy subprime. A lot of the business that we do, but took me under his wing, and then ultimately knew what I had as far as ambition and where I wanted to go, and kind of gave me, his blessing in a way of saying, hey, I'm never going to be mad for someone to, try to improve themselves and head somewhere else. So
that's a good owner.
Yeah.
That's a good owner.
So, Yeah, no, that's
Not everyone says that. I'm sure
no,
people
that's
listening to this are like, yep, definitely not everyone says that. That's a good owner.
yeah. So, about once a year, I actually still text him to this day and just say I appreciate him. He'll just one night I'll just be, hanging out at the house, and I'll just be like, man, I haven't texted Matt for a while, so I'll just randomly text him. But yeah, so it went from there and started working at a Honda store in Anderson, and I actually drove an hour and 40 minutes every day for that opportunity. And I was newly married and newly had a baby. So, but I have a great wife that supports, my career ambition and has supported all the crazy things that we've done over the past, 7 or 8 years. So I was working at that Honda store. We grew that Honda store from, at that time, it was losing money in their new car department. I took over the new car department. And we were on the fringe in Indianapolis. So we were in Anderson, Indiana. And it was a brand new build, but Indianapolis market for Honda dealers is fairly competitive. They have some big players down there. Actually, Rohrman, their Indy Honda store, which is one of their bigger stores, is based out of there.
Yeah, they just opened it. Our team, some members of our team attended the event.
Yeah. So the Rohrmans are great, by the way. I've huge mentors of mine. So took that store and we grew it from a losing Honda store, which, I mean, it's hard to lose money at a Honda store, but they were. And we took it to almost a $2 million net store within 12 months. And ultimately, I remember having conversations. I was there for about 2.5 years, and, I'm in my mid-20s. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of general managers that were in their mid-20s. And they knew that's what I wanted. They knew, hey, and I remember being told by someone high up at that organization that, you're not going to be a general manager until you're in your 30s. And
you proved them wrong.
That I did. And about 6 weeks later, I accepted a job somewhere else that said that they were okay with making general managers. It wasn't an age thing. It was just their ability, So I actually left and...
Hey, Kyle, what was unique about your ability? Like, have you ever asked your bosses, like, hey, why me? Or, was it your emotional intelligence, your non-emotional intelligence? I'm blanking right now. Your actual like, what was it about you?
One of the things that I've always been told is I have a way to get people to follow me. It's interesting. Over the course of my career, people have always told me how hard it is to find good people. And like, I've really never had that problem. I mean, even with my stores now, like half my team that manages my dealerships move their families across the country to come manage these stores for me. In all of my stores that I've ever taken underneath my wing, it's been the same thing. They'll move their families. And, so I guess something about me inspires people to want to get on the team. But that was always something that Trey Rohrman always said is that you have the ability to inspire people to get behind you. So that'd be probably my most impactful trait.
And just in a quick sidebar, why do you think you have that? Like, how were you raised? Were you raised in, did you have to be street smart? I don't know. Like, what's your background? Like, tell me a little bit about your childhood, just so I understand why you maybe built up that type of, skill set, consciously or unconsciously.
Right. So I have an older brother. He actually works, he's a partner on the deal. He's our director of operations, but, both my parents are, middle class America. My dad worked for the union as a roofer. My mom owned her own business. She traveled around the country selling antique toys and collectibles. So I've always had a little bit of hustle in me. I remember going to shows when I was a kid. My mom would set up at these big trade events selling her toys, antique toys, and I would set up my own table. And the promoters at the show would allow me, 8, 9 year old, 10-year-old kid. And that was when Pokemon was first big. And I remember going and buying packs of Pokemon, opening them up, and then reselling them on the table. So I've always had
By
that.
the way,
But
I've been at those shows as well. I know what you're talking about because my mom used to sell like crafts and stuff like that. So as a teen, I would help her, carry the boxes, unload them at the shows, and yeah, that was So I can empathize with that. Except I didn't sell the Pokemon cards there. I sold those at school. So that was I
Well,
like it.
I remember one of my first big sales. I opened it up and I got a Charizard, and I sat it on the table, and I put $100 in front of it. And this was back when $100 was worth way more than what $100 is worth now. And this little old lady said, "My grandson told me that I had to buy this." And I said, "Well, it's $100." I'm like 10 years old. And I remember that first $100 bill I made. And, that stuck out in my mind. But
What were you not good at, or what are you not good at? I'll start, right. I'll start to give you some time to think, right. Like I can be very chaotic. I'm very intense, which I actually think is a good thing, but I can also be very chaotic. So I have an idea and I'm like, I'm running and gunning to get it done. Sometimes it's better to take a step back and, let, let it happen a bit more naturally. So, I have this innate urgency, which again, that's a good thing. But the chaos sometimes that I bring with it is not a good thing. So I work on that, and it's not easy. So now you've had some time to think. Back to you. What are you not good at?
well, I would say that my wife and the people around me would be kind of similar to what you just said. Sometimes I only see the vision and the path there. I'm not necessarily, I don't think about what it takes to get there. I only see the end result. So, right now we're going through all this crazy transition, first 6 months, 2 brand new stores. And I'm already trying to buy other stores, and everybody around me, like, they're barely able to keep their head above water because we're so swamped in new processes. But, I just have this vision of what I want. And sometimes I don't think about everybody around me of what it takes to get there, and the stress that it puts on everybody around me. I kind of thrive on chaos a little bit. I like things to be messy and destructive sometimes, because I feel like if I'm not in some form of chaos, that I feel like maybe I'm going backwards.
This episode is brought to you by Dealer DMV. In today's climate, you probably find your dealership selling more and more vehicles out of state. More sales, always a good thing, but then comes time to title and register, and everyone knows out-of-state titling is a major headache. It doesn't have to be this way. Our friends at Dealer DMV have created a program called Dealer 50, a revolutionary approach to 50-state titling. With Dealer 50, your dealership now has 24/7 portal access to calculations, pre-filled forms, checklists, inquiries, plus white glove processing and specialist support. You can even acquire duplicate titles in all 50 states directly through the Dealer 50 platform. And the best part, it's DMS integrated. Visit dealer50.com, that's DLR50.com, to learn more about this game-changing solution from Dealer DMV, or click the link in the show notes below.
Tell me more about. Okay, so before we started the podcast, you were telling me, and for everyone listening, this is not freaking scripted, so I'm proud of what you're about to say. But you were telling me that you had listened to one of my podcasts, and that inspired you. But can you just give us the backstory? Like, how'd you come across this podcast? What did it teach you? What podcast was it? Just can you give us the full context here?
Yeah, of course. So it's just over a year ago. A good friend of mine that she actually got promoted to my job when I left the Roman Automotive Group. She got promoted to the general manager of the Toyota store that I left. She just was like, "Hey, someone sent me this podcast. I thought you would really like it." And so I was like, "Okay." So I'm sitting at home one night, and I throw my AirPods in, and I'm sitting in bed, and I'm just listening to this, and it's Brett Morgan, and it's about how he grew from like 6 to 60, using private equity. And I remember I listened to it twice because, I'm ADHD in a lot of ways. So, I fixate on one thing and then all of a sudden, I always get something else out of it the second time. So I remember in 2 days, I listened to it twice. And I don't know, I've always knew that I wanted that next step, but I was kind of in a spot at my old organization where I've really had it great. So I was like, man, do I take the leap? And that kind of, I remember listening to that podcast. I was like, man, this guy, he's doing exactly what I want to do. Of course, at that time he was already an owner, and but I was like, it takes one person to take that step. And it was crazy enough. I reached out to the gentleman for Stevens Capital, so I hopped on their website. The
So
private equity.
Stevens Capital is the private equity firm that invested in Morgan Automotive
Yes,
or Morgan
yes,
Auto Group.
that's correct. Yep.
Got it. So you reached out to them and what happened?
So crazy enough, I'm thinking to myself, it was the next day I reach out and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to call this guy and say, hey, do you want to invest, 50 million into me and help me buy some stores? And I leave this guy a voicemail and I'm thinking to myself, he's never going to call me back. And about 45 minutes later, I get my phone rings and I'm like, hello. And he answers and I'm like, okay, wow. And I remember I was sitting on my front porch and we talked for probably 45, 50 minutes just about the business. And he was like, man, like the business needs people like you. He was like, right now, it's what he was expressing is that it's not about a lack of money to be invested right now. It's a lack of people that they have to invest in. And his vote of confidence from just talking to me for 45 minutes was kind of that little extra push for me to say, all right, let's do this. If a guy that I just talked to for 45 minutes, evidently he says that, I have what it takes, from just telling him a little bit about myself, maybe it's time to start doing it. So I started digging into brokers, and I think in the next 2 weeks, I signed like 40 NDAs, trying to go out and, find the right acquisition for my first store. And I actually talked to him multiple times, over the course of that next few months, just kind of running different opportunities by him. And I told him about the opportunity here, and I was really kind of narrowed it down to two different places. One was in Cleveland, and it was a big Stellantis point. And then this opportunity that, while it was more rural, to me, one, a little bit better deal, of course, just because it is in rural community versus the big Stellantis point. But I thought that it would give me more of an upside coming into it day one and being able to have multiple rooftops. I mean, it, kind of a power statement in a way of being day one. I walk in and I buy 2 rooftops at a closing table.
So a couple questions here. First of all, did Stevens Capital invest? Like, are they an investor of yours?
No, so they're not. They gave me some benchmarks and said that, if I can ultimately hit some of these benchmarks that, that they'd be open to invest in me in the future.
Okay. Second question is, second question, how did you finance these acquisitions as a first time owner, former GM? How did you do that?
A lot of stressful nights.
I bet. Give us the secrets.
Yeah. Well, oh man, it's being relentless. That's honestly the biggest thing that I could tell anybody that's listening to this that wants to be a first time owner. You have to be relentless. I have excellent credit. I have a great net worth, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean anything to, to these banks, so fortunately I was given a referral, to a bank locally in Iowa, and they said, hey, you should reach out to them. So I reached out to them. Before I know it, I'm speaking with the vice president of a branch, and he was like, yeah, we'd love to at least look at it. And there were a lot of trials and tribulations along the way to get to the closing table. Ultimately we did SBA. we found that that was probably the best course of action. So for the real estate, yeah, so we did SBA 504. Um, and that gives you the ability to come in with a little bit less out of pocket, which allows for some extra cash to have for operating capital. Um, but it's just about being creative. When one bank tells you no, or 10 banks tell you no, it's finding a way to fight through that and finding the one that'll say yes. And ultimately, that's what we did. And we have a great partnership with the bank that ultimately gave us the opportunity to get our first stores. And we're still partnering with them and looking at future acquisitions currently.
This episode is also brought to you by Impel. A word of caution to dealers: open source GPTs are conversation tools, not business solutions. If you want to embrace results, not risk, choose AI that's designed for automotive retail. With Impel AI, you can drive real results throughout the entire customer journey. From website, chat, sales, and service, Impel AI is custom built to achieve your business objectives. It features a proprietary blend of large language models, automotive optimization layers, and seamless integration with your entire tech stack. The result? Exceptional customer experiences and increased customer lifetime value, and that means more revenue and greater profitability. Embrace results, not risk, with Impel AI. See what the future of AI looks like today. Visit impel.ai or click the link in the show notes below.
Some tactical questions now for our audience that likes tactics. I love tactics. How did you value the dealerships? Like last 12 months, last 24 months, what did you do? Last 6 months? How did you value it?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting valuation because COVID, there were still so many COVID years in there. But I really looked at it from a standpoint of I ended up paying a 2 multiple of what they'd done net wise. So it was a 2x of their net for the previous 24 months.
So 2x net. And what brands was it again?
Ford, Stellantis, Chevy, and GMC.
Got it. Yeah, that's low. Like, that's good.
Yeah, well, it's a rural market, so it's different. These stores, in a tier 2 or even a tier 3 market, would have probably been a 5x, because they're profitable, and I looked at 5x stores. But when I looked at it, I said, all right, well, do I buy a store that's already 100% market efficient, or 120% market efficient? Yeah, I mean, there's still probably upside there in the finance department and the service department. Or do I buy a store that's 35% market efficient and come in and just blow the doors off? And so far, I mean, my Ford, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but Stellantis so far has been my number one volume new car brand. So last month we were third in the entire region, and I don't have enough Stellantis inventory. Like I'm probably in a position that every Stellantis dealer would love right now. I only have like 30 cars on Grand, but I'm only on a 90-day turn on my new car inventory.
But what's driving that? Are you just discounting them very heavily? Like how profitable is your Stellantis store right now?
That it's my Ford Stellantis because we're a dual point. So Iowa is unique. We're, dual franchises. That's my most profitable store thus far. And a lot of that comes from the finance department. So that's kind of my background is finance. So, that's what I liked. Typically the thing that I look at to decide whether a store has dramatic upside is the first thing I do is I turn to their finance page on their statements. And, when I turn to it and I say, oh, great, they're running $400 per copy, I start to get excited because even if you don't add one car in volume and you go in and you go just to the NADA average per copy, all of a sudden your store triples their net, so that we found great success so far with our finance team. I partnered with JM&A for my reinsurance. So that's been one of the biggest success points. And then our fixed operations, of course, because as you sell more used cars, your internal department only it's your best customer. So that's where I found our biggest success so far. But yeah, we're heavily discounting. Crazy enough, so these stores previously they didn't discount off of MSRP. So this even pre-COVID and after COVID, when last 24 months, as especially in the domestic world, as their inventory started to increase, everybody around them was discounting. These stores in this market, even still to this day, I have competing stores within 20 miles of me that are still pricing their cars at MSRP. It blows my mind. Um, you know,
There's a lot of inefficiency.
yeah. Oh, no question. A lot of the third generations that still are running the business and they're like, well, that's how we've always done it.
So how did you have an issue getting approved by the franchises as a first time owner?
No. So
And
I
again,
believe,
just for context, quick context for the audience that don't know, right? You buy a franchise dealership. Part of that process is getting approved by Ford, getting approved by GM to be the dealer, right? They have a brand to uphold, and of course, they want reputable operators or operators with experience. Now, you obviously have been a GM for a very long time, but I'm just curious, as a first time owner, acquiring multiple stores at once, was that an issue from getting approved by the automakers?
so ultimately I was approved. Iowa is an interesting state. That's the best thing. The way I can say it is Iowa is a great state for first time buyers. Um, of course, I had concerns just because I was trying to buy multiple brands at one time. Ford and Stellantis. Stellantis, I wasn't extremely worried about. I'd been told behind the scenes that it wouldn't be an issue with my background. I mean, my Toyota store that I ran, I was 175% sales efficient. A manufacturer ultimately sets what the store should sell based off of the market and based off of previous registrations in the market. And every brand has their own kind of spin on how they come up with the math. But Toyota, let's say that my previous store, they would say, hey, based off your market, your store should sell 150 new Toyotas a year. Now, of course, ours was a lot higher. But then if we sell 200, ultimately we're more than 100% market efficient. So, that kind of sets you apart, if you're, and especially with Toyota being that we had no dealer had inventory, even after COVID, and still to this day, Toyotas are struggling with inventory. I mean, I have friends that run Toyota stores that every month they're still selling down to single digits, and they're selling 80, 90 cars a month new, and at the end of the month, they end up with 5 new Toyotas left on ground, so to be over market efficient with no inventory, it definitely has its challenges, but we found a way to do it. So, my last 3 years with Toyota, on an average, I was right at 175% market efficient, for my Toyota brand. And Toyota, their biggest thing is TLE, which for anybody that's listening that doesn't know, TLE is basically customer retention. So that's Toyota's, that's the only way you can win President's Award with Toyota. So my last 2 years with Toyota, I technically would have won their President's Award. But unfortunately, our facility, we were building a brand new store, and the only way you can get president is if you have a compliant building. But I hit all their metrics as far as with TLE for customer retention. I was actually a top 10% TLE store for customer retention, and that's in service. So Toyota doesn't necessarily look at CSI as much. It's an interesting, which in this world where every brand is, CSI, and that you get your monthly call, whether you're on the good list or the naughty list for your CSI. Toyota kind of looks at things a little different because they understand that, hey, sometimes the surveys maybe can be a little misleading and confuse a customer. That sometimes I've been with brands where they ask the same question twice. They word the second question in a different way to almost trick them. It's like, are you sure you had a great experience? Well, maybe I didn't. So even with that, Toyota looks at it and says, okay, well, if they gave you a a 4 out of 5 when they bought a car. But over the next 2 years, they service their vehicle with you 4 more times. They probably are a pretty loyal customer. So they say, as long as they keep servicing with you, you must be doing something right, because there are other choices for them to go service their vehicle. And in some situations, they can go get an oil change for less expensive at a non-franchise dealer. But there is something about getting your oil changed at a Ford dealership and you're driving a Ford. So there was concerns in my mind. I fought through to get the financing done. And then, you have that fear of getting approved by the manufacturer. It's like, well, the bank said yes to me. Now are the manufacturers going to say yes to me? Ultimately, we had some small bumps along the way, but ultimately, we were able to get across the finish line.
They say every deal dies, 10 times before it gets done. And truer words have never been spoken, right? Like it's deals just are very, very tough to get done. Whether anyone here that's ever bought a piece of real estate, anything that's, it's difficult, right?
I would say we probably died about 20 times. And then even after we closed the deal, we died. Because ultimately, I won't speak exactly what happened just for confidentiality reasons, but the day of closing, an hour before we closed the deal, my floor plan financing, they pulled out. Nothing like I moved my whole family. I have friends that moved out here. We had signed the agreements and they pulled the rug out from underneath us. Fortunately, the previous owner, he floor planned us.
Shut up. Oh, okay. Seller financing. I like that.
So
That's
yeah,
epic.
yeah. So it was pretty crazy. Nothing like I probably didn't sleep for 30 days, with how everything played out. But the previous owners, he was like, well, he'd owned 11 stores at one time. He's like, this isn't my first time dealing with this. This is actually happens. You know what I mean? So he was like, especially with the bank that you were trying to get it with. So he was like, I'll seller finance you.
Wow.
So
that's huge.
he wrote a check for almost $4.5 million for the new car inventory. Told me I just sell through the used that I have on ground and pay him as he goes. And then anything that I took in on trade, I would just own in cash. And then ultimately, we found multiple floor plan companies. But it was just getting everything set up. We thought we had everything done, and then day of closing.
Talk about really dying at the last moment. Listen, dude, like I love it. You just brute force your way and you kept finding creative solutions. You know what I mean? By the way, I have a feeling like I know who that floor plan lender is. Unfortunately, I'm not going to try to get a name out of you because I know you're under confidentiality and it's irrelevant. But that is very frustrating. I'm glad it worked out though.
The only thing you can do is just wake up the next day and come in and put your work clothes on and sell cars. That's all you can do, right? Sell and service cars and find a way to profit. And even with all that turmoil and everything going on, we've actually been profitable every single month. We haven't had a negative month yet, which has been amazing.
As much as you can share, what were your profits when you made the acquisition? What are you today netting, or what's your margin? Can you shed some light into that?
Yeah. I can say, I don't want to get in too deep on that, but, I can say this, that after 4 months, we had netted what the previous owner had netted for their previous 2 years. So, it's been a really good turnaround. So, my Ford CDG store, we're up 200% in volume and in net, month over month. So we've been growing at great speeds, and that's with not having hardly any inventory on ground. When I bought the store, the Stellantis, we had 30 Stellantis units on ground, and we had 11 Fords. So we're, talk about, doing this with no inventory too, but yeah, we've really, our best month has been 110,000 net at my Ford CDG store. I mean, and that's, for a renewal store, it's funny. I remember talking with my Ford rep, and of course, they see all the statements and everything every month, and he was like, "Hey, like, what happened last month?" I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, that's huge. He's like, you guys had a great month last month. I was like, and coming from a powerhouse Toyota store, I'm like thinking to myself, really, 110,000? That's powerhouse. Like, so we, there, to me though, like I was disappointed with that. Like I still thought there was a ton of growth and a ton of room. But it's just trying to set a new standard for this market. Unfortunately, there's a lot of sleepy dealers, a lot of dealers that probably will sell within the next 24 months as we go back, or I mean, not even go back, but we're in the old car business. You actually have to sell cars now. Which we're back to what the brave new world, of pre-COVID car business.
Let me ask you this question. I'm sure there's lots of people listening here that are inspired by your story and either would love to do the same or would love to possibly even join you. We've had many dealers who have come on and just told their story and received lots of, interest in people wanting to work with them, for them, after the fact. Is there something that you have said like, hey, I'm going to do this differently with my operation? But is there something where you said, when I own my own dealership, I will do X, Y, Z differently? Is there anything like that today at your dealership?
Yeah, there's a few things. Yeah, I mean, pay people. As crazy as that sounds, you know, one of the things actually, it's funny that stuck out from the Brett Morgan conversation is, he talked about on there, he talked about paying people and never losing a great employee. Retention. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's about retaining and keeping your best people. Like I want to pay people so much that they don't ever even consider wanting to look somewhere else. Like that's how, like right now, I hate to say it, I probably overpay. And even in this market, like I came into this market and I probably, from what the people that were here previous, what they were used to, getting paid, and, finance managers, sales managers, GSMs, service managers, like I came in and I changed everybody's pay plan and gave them raises. And, I probably could have kept them, on their old pay plans, and they probably wouldn't even ever thought anything different. But like, I want people to look at it. I want them to help me grow, right? Like I want them to be excited about us hitting goals, and them to be, compensated in a way to where when the store wins, they win big too. That for me has always been something. It was funny when I was with the Roman Automotive Group, I had the highest paid sales managers in the entire organization. You can text Trey Rorman and Ryan Rorman right now, and he will concur that I always paid people the most. My finance department was always the highest compensated, but it was funny enough, every year we won the most awards every year. Roman Automotive did something every year. It was called the Alpha Award, where it's their best general, their number one GM, and they rated off of 15 different categories, from net profit to CSI to retention, to also even breaks it down to retaining employees. And I was back-to-back champion for the Alpha Award. And there's only one GM that wins it every year. And no one ever, unfortunately, came close. There are a lot of great general managers in the Roman organization, a lot of friends that I still talk to. But unfortunately, I found that by paying people, they work 10 times harder because realistically, I mean, the business that we do is not easy. I mean, it's a toll. My father, he worked in the union. He was a roofer. And I remember coming home, and he'd come home and he'd be covered head to toe. His hands would be cut up. He worked a real tough job, where it's tough on your body. And, some days, the mental toll that in this business will put on you, it probably in some ways feels more straining than the physical strain that we have, from the mental side of things. Um, so if nothing else, if someone does a good job, we should compensate them for doing it. And if they every year they put you in a place to where you're standing on stage and you're receiving an award, knowing that they're getting compensated to put you in that place for the store to win awards and for, to get accolades, it says something about you.
One of the craziest things about the Car Dealership Guy platform is our direct access to literally thousands of dealership and automotive employees. So naturally, I often hear this question: CDG, can you use your network to help me fill an open role at my company? Well, now I can. Building on the success of my free industry job board, I'm proud to launch CDG Recruiting, a more hands-on white glove automotive recruiting service. Whether you're looking to fill roles in dealership management, C-suite, F&I, fixed ops, auto tech, SaaS, we take the hassle out of hiring by doing the heavy lifting for you. And here's the best part: we vet and screen thousands of candidates so you don't have to. And with our placement guarantee, hiring through CDG Recruiting is 100% worry-free. Our team has decades of experience and has successfully placed over 1,000 roles in the automotive industry. So if you're ready to find your next rockstar employee, try CDG Recruiting today by visiting cdgrecruiting.com or clicking the link in the show notes below. Again, that's cdgrecruiting.com.
Now, tell me about, I heard you're looking to buy a Toyota store. Is that true?
Yeah. I love Toyota. It's a great brand. They're 100% dealer people.
How are you going to do that? Like, how are you going to, everyone wants a Toyota store, right? It's like the cream of the crop. How do you think you're going to do that? Or are you already in the process? I mean, what can you tell us?
Yeah. So, there are several acquisitions that I'm looking at making right now. Toyota is one that's, I'm in the works of putting that to bed. And in the next 12 to 18 months, we'll have a Toyota store underneath the Coleman Automotive Group.
Tell me about your team, right? So you've been an owner for 6 months now, so going on 7. And you mentioned that your older brother is your director of operations, which is an extremely important role. What about, do you have any other key members in your leadership team? Who are they? How'd you find them? Can you give us a little more context there?
Yeah, of course. So, my finance director, his name's Jay Nelson, great guy, extremely hard worker. And honestly, he's probably my lowest compensated person right now, but as far as for director roles and things like that, but he believes in my vision, and he knows that when I'm in a position to pay him more, he'll be the first person that gets it. But he's jumping in for the long game. I mean, so he comes out 3 weeks a month and rents a place here and helps us, build out processes, helps us hire people. So he's
what do you mean? What do you mean he comes out 3 weeks a month? What do you mean by that?
So he lives in Indiana, full time. And then he actually just sold his home in Indiana. And he's been looking for a place out in this area because he knows that we're going to buy more stores. So ultimately that's the path that we're on. So right now he's here 3 weeks a month and just rents a place, Airbnb. And, fortunately we're on we're in a lake town. So there are a lot of really nice rentals. So he's become kind of a local in that sense of meeting all the Airbnb owners in the area. But yeah, he's here 3 weeks a month. Day one, actually, the week before the close, he was out here just getting things up and running, getting our processes, getting, the behind the scenes things that, even from managing stores for so many years, from anybody, I'll tell you, there are way more things behind the scenes that it takes to start a store. Way more things.
Can you tell us about some of them? Just some of the things you went through?
Yeah, I mean, just from setting up insurance and benefits, that is not an easy for small groups. I mean, there's power in numbers. If you have more than 50 employees, it makes a heck of a lot easier. But unfortunately, when you're under 50 employees, they make it really tough to be able to offer those type of benefits to your employees. But ultimately, it's the same thing. We're probably overpaying for our benefits to be able to offer those type of options for our team to have. But, that's something that you just have to do. You can't be the guy in the car business that says, oh yeah, we don't offer insurance, so you pay more so your team can have it at a fair price. those type of things, just setting up the DMSs, the inventory feeds, thinking about, oh, well, now we got to take pictures of our inventory, the vendor for that, your menus. I mean, all the things that you take for granted when you walk into a store that's already up and running. Even as an operator, you walk in day one, all right, now all we got to worry about is, uh, processes and people, right? Well, day one for me was processes and people and selling cars, but then I have to set up everything in the backside so that we can do all those things.
Was there anything particularly delightful during the setup process, whether it was setting up some process, a system, a DMS, I don't know, benefits even, like anything? Was there anything that you were surprisingly delightful where you said, wow, that was easy, this was a great partner, or this was just, better than I expected? Anything like that?
So I had the benefit of coming from large organizations. So, and a lot of times with small dealers, you would get the sales rep that's over the region. Well, I had cell phone numbers for people that were high up at like Cox Automotive. So, I kind of leaned on some of those previous things. So actually, crazy enough, my Cox Automotive experience has been great. They've treated me like I'm a big player, even though I'm a small player right now. Because I think, from my experience of knowing these guys and leveraging previous, opportunities and stores that I've ran, that they know that in 5 years, when I have 15, 20 stores, that ultimately by taking care of me day one, that they'll be taken care of too. Because, I still kind of, even though I'm young, I'm, only 37 years old. I started in the business at the tail end of like relationships, like where you could call up your buyer and you could get a deal done, and you could paint a story about a customer, on the sub finance, type of thing. Like, hey, let me tell you a story why this customer needs this car, So, to me, I still in my mind lean on the relationship side of the business, which I think, and unfortunately, that we've really went away from that in so many ways with so many of these big conglomerates, buying up everything. The relationship side of the car business is kind of dying off, so if I can keep a little bit of that alive, I think that, that helps me grow a little bit faster.
Yeah, that's huge. So tell me about what's your plan for like future financing and other stores? I had this written down as a note, right? Going through additional acquisitions, you started with SBA. How do you plan on doing this? Are you looking into private equity? It's not really a path most dealers take. Curious to know what you're thinking of.
So I actually have something to talk about on this. It's pretty interesting. So um, I've highly considered the private equity route. But ultimately, because the route that I'm on, no matter how good I do, I'm going to have to grow at the speed of which the banks will allow me to grow. Right. So in the last week and a half, I've officially filed paperwork with the SEC, and I started my own private equity group.
Whoa. Can you explain this to us a little bit more? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, I decided that instead of going out and going to an already established private equity fund, I would just start my own private equity fund and go out and find people that believe in the vision that I have and would like to invest, and find ways to get in the car business creatively, because, it is hard to get in the car business. They make it to where you almost have to have been an owner to be an owner. Um, So I thought, well, hey, if people want to be part owners of car dealerships, I'll give them a creative way. So by starting a private equity, fund, I can go out and find people that maybe have always dreamed of owning a small piece of a car dealership, but they would do it inadvertently through a private equity fund.
Explain this to me a little bit more. Like, you just purchased multiple dealerships. You're still at the kind of beginning of your journey. Why split up your focus? Or when you say launch a private equity fund, right? are you anticipating sourcing opportunities to invest in deals which, you're not the operator in? Or or do you just mean you're trying to pool money so that you can make acquisitions, do acquisitions much faster velocity and not be, at the mercy of raising capital each time? Like, take us one layer deeper, what you really mean by this.
So it's kind of a little mix of both. So ultimately, what we're planning on setting up is we're going to have a third party. Our private equity group will be outside, and then the Coleman Automotive Group will be managers and operators of the new acquisitions that the private equity group will fund. So we'll still control a controlling interest in those acquisitions, but the private equity would be the sole fundees of those acquisitions. So then every time we find an acquisition that we want to use the private equity funds for, we'll go out and raise a fund specifically for that acquisition.
Okay, so I interpret it a little bit differently, but you're essentially looking to, raise syndicates on a per deal basis for opportunities that you find in order to, have just, additional access to capital and grow faster.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, no matter what and how much money you're making, acquisitions are expensive. I mean, realistically, I look back and I probably didn't have enough capital, really. They put those minimum capital requirements. The manufacturers say, "Hey, you need X amount of dollars," and that number is great, but really you need more. So, especially if you want to have growth, and at the growth that we're having now. Fortunately, we've been highly profitable every single month, so that allows us to fuel the growth. But yeah, when I looked at it, I said, I probably could have looked at the next 5 years, and I said, I could have fought through, 5 acquisitions and grown, and we would have been 7 rooftops. But then I say, okay, well, how can I supercharge that? So I said, well, if I have a private equity group that is funding specific acquisitions, typically some of the larger ones, that can fuel that side of things. And then the holding company is kind of allowing us to fuel internal acquisitions without using the private equity. Then I can have 2 prongs. I can have the private equity side of the company and our standard holding company that's doing acquisitions. So then I say, all right, well, what I could have done in 5 years is additional 5 acquisitions. Now with the private equity, maybe I can add another 13, because my goal is 15 within 5 years, 15 restaurants. So kind of doing it from a 2-prong aspect.
Yeah. One thing you should consider is having a proportionate contribution in every single deal. That way the interests are aligned for you and investors. I mean, I can only imagine investors would want that. Otherwise it could get tricky with, how do you know when to use private equity capital versus when not to use private equity capital, and it could lead to some conflict of interest, but I'm sure you're thinking about these things. Just what comes to mind.
No, I've, so I found a fund manager. He's very, very successful, entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. He owns a ton of very, very successful large organizations, based out of Indiana. And ultimately, I reached out to him and kind of pitched him this idea like 60 days ago. I said, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking. I want to do this." And he's like, "I love this." He was like, "I've actually been a part of a few of these things, and I have some friends that have started their own private equity to fund these type of opportunities, not in the automotive space, but in other spaces." And ultimately, to the point is I pitched him on this idea. I remember me and my wife, it's a Sunday, like that's my only day off, in the car business. And we're driving up to Sioux Falls, which is the closest metropolitan, for us. They have a Costco, so we have to, drive up there. And I call him and I pitch him this idea. And then like a day later, he's like, "Hey, like I love this." He's like, "I've actually already built out like the whole like behind the scenes of how we would do this." And then ultimately to the point to where this last week the lawyers are paid and up and running and everything's filed. And, now we're on our way to start, raising capital to fund, this grand ambition that I have of, where I see this, cause like, it's crazy for me. Like I see what the company looks like 15 years from now.
What does it look like?
So, I take a lot of things in the sense of how the Rohrman organization does business. Trey and Ryan Rohrman, they're inspirational to say the least. I mean, I couldn't speak more highly of both those individuals and, how they've been for me, coming from the guy that, comes to him and says, "Hey, I'm leaving to buy my own stores." And they say, "We love it." And they said, "Who do you have to take from your stores, my current store, to be successful?" Like what owners, or operators of a large automotive group, I mean, do those type of things. I mean, and they're, "Hey, when's your last day? We want to make sure that we send you off." And I mean, they had me work up until my last day, which that's unheard of. Typically when you say, "Hey, I'm leaving," they're like, "All right, hey, can I get your demo keys?" Yeah, can I get your demo keys? And we'll leave a box by your office with your stuff in it. And that wasn't the case. I mean, they up until the last day, I mean, still just 2 days ago, Trey texted me and just told me, "Hey, I'm thinking of you, praying for you and your family." I mean, it just salt of the earth. But, when it comes to the business side of things, is they're looking to the future, and that's for me, like I look at it and it's like, I see the Coleman Automotive Group with 40 rooftops. Like that's the number in my head. Now, of course, I'm never going to be upset if it's 50, but like in 15 years, we will have 40 rooftops.
You'll get there.
And we're going to do it the right way. We're going to make sure that the right acquisitions and that we're doing it in a way that we're taking care of the people first. I've been a part of acquisitions with other organizations where they go in and they bully their way around of like, "Well, this is how we do it." And that's great. There are ways to do that. And I'm sure in some ways, you have to do that in some ways of, "Hey, we're going to do things this way because this is the way that we have to take care of our customers." But making sure that the people are taken care of, because ultimately that's the business we're in. We're in a people business. If you take care of the people, they take care of everything else. So I see this vision for our group of a powerhouse where we're partnered with the manufacturers, where the manufacturers are helping you acquire more stores. Like for me, that sounds like exciting, where I have my manufacturer partners calling up and saying, "Hey, we hear there's rumors that this person might be getting out. We'd love for you to be the person that gets that store."
Yeah, you want to build that brand.
Yeah, no question. All the brands that we have right now, and all the brands that we're looking at, we're domestic heavy, of course. So that's all we have right now. We're on the domestic side of things, but I couldn't be happier with how they've helped me. Ford has been amazing. To me, they've been, Ford and GM have been the most boots on the ground. Ford has given me every piece of inventory. And right now, I mean, there's still constraints on inventory with Ford, with a lot of different of our models, but any supplements I've asked for, they give me. Right now we went from having 10 cars to having 60 on ground within 60 days. And that's tough, for a brand to be able to give you all that inventory without, hurting other people in the region. So Ford has been amazing. I couldn't be more excited about buying more Ford stores. And I know, sometimes, there's been a lot to say about Ford over the last couple years. But I'm excited about the future with Ford, especially with, they've drawn back on some of the EV things. That's been exciting, especially in a extremely rural area where we don't have a supercharger. Our closest supercharger is an hour and 40 minutes away. And there's not any charging points between us and them. So, we're definitely in a market where the EV, like people in this, it's unique. People in this market, they're still skeptical of hybrids. uh, like we got the power boost hybrid trucks, and they're like, yeah, I'm not buying no hybrids. So it's unique. But I look at it, doing it the right way, taking care of the people. And you can grow in a way where you don't have as many broken eggs. If you can grow in a way where you're not breaking eggs, and people are trying to get their friends and family to come work for you. I would say that was always the most unique thing when I started working for Rorman is I'd hire somebody, and I guess I never looked at it from that perspective, but I'd hire someone and people be excited about getting their friends to come work for us. And, coming from the car business, that's not always the case. I've worked for organizations where, it's easier to see that happen the opposite way, where you're getting people to pull from you, but to have people excited to come into work, that speaks volumes for, the way things are being done on a day-to-day on a store level.
What do your wife and family think about all this?
At times, they probably think I'm crazy. My wife, she works full time in the stores. Right now, she went day one. We didn't have a controller. So she stepped in and never have been a controller, and literally started watching webinars with our DMS provider of how to post deals, how to clear schedules. So she hopped right in day one, and we figured out how to do it. A lot of sleepless nights for her too.
Dude, that's epic. You are the American dream, man. Congrats to you in a big way, because you're doing it right. And it's just, it's entrepreneurship. You pull everyone around you. That's just how it works. Everyone somehow ends up being involved, because, you always need those release valves. So you're doing a wonderful job. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you big picture, what are just several pieces of advice you have for people that maybe aspire to do what you're doing, or kind of want to, walk a similar path as you? What would you offer them as advice?
The thing that comes to my mind in this situation, because I've had people that have reached out to me and I've asked, well, what's the difference? You have to just relentless. You can't, if you hear no 20 times, expect to hear it another 20 times, and keep going, keep on the path. If you keep on the path, it'll pay. You'll be an operator, but be ready to ask yourself if you're crazy after you got what you asked for.
Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it.
That is a fact. I had it made at my previous spot. I could have worked there for the rest of my career and retired there and lived an incredible life. But ultimately my path and my goals aligned differently to where, I wanted to do this, but it's relentless. Don't give up at the first no or the first 20 no's. And then, make sure you surround yourself with the right people. People, they're the difference makers in everything that we do. I was reading this study recently, and it talked about the people that you surround yourself with. In a workplace, at home, it makes the difference that you have the support system, whether you're at home or whether you're at you're at work. I'm not saying, hey, go find a better wife, because at the end of the day, my wife has supported my ambition and to the fullest. Anytime I'm like, hey, we got to move here, she's like, okay, well, when do we need to have the boxes packed? She's always
you gotta marry well, my friend. You gotta marry well. That's the life hack no one talks about. Marry well.
No question. That is the life hack that no one talks about, is marry well. Because without that support system, I couldn't imagine, wanting to do everything that I've done with not having her support and just pushing through that, because there are times when I've looked, I'm like, man, am I on the right path? And she was like, you're on the right path. You just got to keep pushing through. But yeah, the people, the people that you surround yourself with, that's going to make the difference on those days where maybe you have some doubt, where you're like, man, did I make the right decision? I remember Ryan, Rorman, and Trey, they asked me, they're like, hey, like 3 months in, there's probably going to come a point where you're like, did I make the right decision? You're going to ask yourself that. And if you don't ask yourself that, then you're probably crazy. And you have to power through and say, yeah, I made the right decision, and only look forward. But be relentless and surround yourself with people that have the same vision of where you're going.
Kyle Coleman, hell of a pod. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I just wanted to say thanks. It's crazy how, everything has turned to the point to where just over a year ago, I'm listening to your podcast about someone acquiring and growing their group to something that I aspire to now owning my own group and aspiring to do those same things. So it's, be relentless, folks. Your goals and dreams are out there. You just have to be willing to hear no a lot and fight through that.
I love it. Kyle Coleman, thanks for coming on the pod. This was incredible.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.